Hey guys. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie, for all the major plot reveals and story threads that we get in this chapter, I kinda like how there was just this real simplicity to the chapter, of just Zoro looking back on his past and not only realizing the connected thread of his swords, but also using that as a means to show that each of the swords Zoro has is a reflection of the journey that has ultimately led him to this point, and it was through Zoro drawing upon that past and those experiences is what made him realize that what he needed to do in order to really master Enma's power. Like this is a chapter that kind of shows that really up to this point it wasn't really even any sort of a curse that or anything like with Katetsu the Third that was causing Zoro trouble. It's just the fact that Zoro he like so many before him like he pretty much he needed to grow stronger. He needed to show he was powerful enough in order to wield the sword itself, as so many others before him have failed to do. And I also really like that idea in this chapter that debunks the whole. I like how this whole chapter it kind of debunks the idea of a sword's curse. Like when you really like what this chapter is basically saying is that the people who wielded these swords, who used them, it wasn't so much that the sword and were killed because of it. It's not so much that the swords were cursed. It's just that the people who wielded them, who used them to begin with, weren't skilled enough to begin with, showcasing the whole idea that there's always two sides to every story, and that even for swords, there's always an exaggerated legend born through fear, and the fear of not, and those that have died, those who have died wielding these swords. It's just that they pretty much weren't powerful and weren't strong enough to wield them. The whole curse thing, it was just born through that fear of wielding those swords. Now, with that said, we get the biggest the biggest reveal for all this is we get the reveal of the man himself. We get the reveal of the man himself. We get the reveal of the man himself. Shim Otsuki Kozaburo was the one who forged both Wado Ichimonji and Enma, and through that knowledge, Zoro's backstory basically gets the Sanji treatment in this chapter, with us seeing another side of it that we hadn't yet seen, but the pieces were basically all there. And I'll be honest, I'm one of those very few I know there are a lot of people who love Zoro's backstory, but I was always kind of one of the few who was mixed on Zoro's like initial backstory, like the one we got at the very beginning of the series. Because for me, while Kuina's death was a tragedy, and I can see how her death would motivate Zoro to pick up the sword and continue on their shared dream together. It was also Zoro's backstory was also the one out of all the Straw Hats that felt the most like there were pieces missing to it. So just by virtue of inserting Kozaburo into it, and seeing him bond with Zoro, and seeing Kozaburo like teach him lessons about the sword, it not only adds so much more to the backstory itself, but just adds another layer of emotional weight onto Zoro's like resolve and growth back then, and how far he's come. And I love that with all this and him taking control of Enma is basically reaffirmation that he will become the greatest swordsman in the world. Like it's going after this, like he's taken that next big huge step towards becoming that greatest swordsman in the world. And yeah, it's like just the backstory in itself. It adds so much to Zoro's character and his history. I think more than I thought was possible, more than I ever thought before. And now we also get confirmation from Queen in this episode that King is basically the last Lunarian. Like he's kind of reconfirming that for us, and that the Lunarians were considered gods at their time. So Yeah, I feel this is more or less confirms that I was saying before the Lunarians are more or less like the equivalent of fallen angels. But with that said, there's two things that this has me looking forward to. The first being is that all these big revelations we're getting with the Lunarians in itself, when you get down to it, it really is just surface level setup for when we finally go into a full-on lengthy tale from the past about what happened and how the celestial dragons truly came to power from driving the Lunarians to near extinction. Now, that also just leaves the question of when and if we're going to get this like whole backstory and whatnot of what happened in the past. And if I had to guess, I'd probably say around the time when things come to a head with Dragon and the world government is when we're finally going to get that, because Oda's been rather silent on touching on that specific on Dragon and the revolutionaries again. But the other thing, but it you can tell he's setting it all up for like for the big clash, the big war kind of thing. And I think that it's in somewhere in between that where I think we will get a lot more like fun to get the full story on these Lunarians. Um, but the other thing is the name Lunarians, and this is where I get rather far fetched with it. But I feel when we do get a full deep dive into the Lunarians, it's actually going to be crossing over with a story thread Oda hasn't touched on since Skypiea, which is the cover story going on with Eneru and the Moon. Like it's I know it's weird to say, but again, just with the word Lunarians, it makes me think that there's a connection between what's going on the moon, whatever's going on the moon right now, and the history of the Lunarians. Like I can't say with certainty, but they're just name wise, it feels like there might be a connection there, and it just feels like the actual moon is gonna play a part in the story very soon. But beyond that, I'll just be curious to see to what extent King meant by King's ability to survive in any natural environment. Because actually that's the other thing. If they're Lunarians originally from the moon, if their ability to make if they have that ability, then it would make sense that being from the moon, they would be able to do that, as the moon is like the ultimate atmosphere, surviving both hot and cold environments. Like it kind of is the perfect way to do that. Um, with that with that said, the chapter also returns briefly to the Queen versus Sanji fight, and I want to dive into something I didn't really touch on all that much to the last time we got Sanji versus Queen, where Sanji basically asked Zoro to kill him if he didn't come out of the fight as himself. And since then, many have been saying that Sanji is basically gonna die, and I'm not gonna deny it will happen because given Oda's very complicated relationship with Sanji's role in the story, it kind of does make sense narratively overall that at some point Sanji will die. But as far as when he's going to die, I genuinely do not believe it'll be here in Wano or even by Zoro's hands. Like I feel that like Sanji asking Zoro to kill him is really just Oda's way of saying yes, Sanji at some point is going to die. But I think if Sanji is going to die, it will be closer to the end of the story, somewhere between the point before the Throne War finally takes place and when it finally hits the fan. Like if Oda, like for me, if Oda was to kill any of the Straw Hats, that like the Throne War feels like the perfect emotional high point to do it, as it is basically their final journey together before finally obtaining the One Piece. And yeah, just in general, Wano, for as big as it is, does not feel like the appropriate point or the appropriate point for pretty much Sanji to die. Like, because if he did die in Wano, it would honestly, no matter how Oda managed it, just to make it emotional, it would still feel just too soon. Like if the way Sanji's death should be treated is the Supergirl death. die, he's got to go out swinging in a final blaze of glory. Like, if that's the only way I think I can honestly kind of accept Sanji's death is if it happened like with him going all out nonstop, just if he died in a complete blaze of glory. And I think that kind of that and the Throne War does feel like the perfect scenario to do it. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on, and just tell me what you guys think. Where do you think Sanji's gonna die? But yeah, guys, that's if you enjoyed the video, just like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, subscribe button, and just share the video, everyone, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.